Hi, everyone. I'd like to call to order the July 15th, 2019 regular meeting of the Board of Education. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies in which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the Highland Park Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting setting forth the time, date, and location to be submitted for publication to the Home News Tribune and Star Ledger and posted on the board's website at least 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Members of the public who wish to address the board will be given an opportunity to do so before we adjourn for the evening. Linda, may we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Byer?
Here.
Ms. Simoresti? Ms. Coleman?
Here.
Ms. Gowan?
Here.
Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Mr. Magaziner?
Here.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola?
Here.
Mr. Roslevich? Mr. Woodward? Everybody's on that side.
I know, it's a little strange over here, right? We could span it, spread out later.
Camera. Nobody over there.
Be it resolved, pursuant to the Sunshine Act, NJSA 10:4-12 and 13, the Highland Park Board of Education will now meet in closed session to discuss the superintendent's evaluation and matters related to HIB and student discipline. These exemptions are permitted to be discussed in closed session in accordance with NJSA 10:4-13. Didn't we just say that? Okay, well, we're saying it again. Information regarding the board's closed session discussion will be disclosed to the public as soon as the need for confidentiality no longer exists. We will be reconvening at 7:30. Linda, do we need to have a vote to adjourn to closed session?
Yes.
May we have
someone to make a motion?
I would like to move that we adjourn to closed session.
Second.
May we have a roll call, please?
This is a voice vote.
A voice. May we have some sort of vote?
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We'll be back at 7:30. I'd like to move that we reconvene to public session.
So moved. Sorry. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. My
No,
apologies.
You say it.
Say it.
All in favor?
Aye.
I thought you were saying it. At this time, I'd like to invite anybody so inclined to stand up and recite or listen to the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Hofela. Is it Hofela? Am I pronouncing it right all these years?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any communications that didn't make it into the agenda?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Moving on to number 8, corrections to the minutes. I would like to move that we correct the minutes as indicated on the written agenda. There is a correction to the minutes of May 13th. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's a change in the indicated salary. Number 42, there's a correction in the name of one of our social work interns. Moving on, there are some amendments to the June 3rd, 2019 meeting minutes. Just one correction, I'm sorry. It's a clerical correction. And a couple of corrections to the minutes of the June 10th, 2019 meeting. Anybody?
Second.
Second? Oh, I'm not going to describe the whole thing? All right. I move that we make those corrections to the minutes as indicated.
Second.
Who moved?
I moved and Mark
I
seconded.
Can I just have a
Yes.
quick question, point of order thing? So normally we would be having a workshop and then a regular meeting. This is kind of taking the place of both the workshop and the regular meeting into one meeting. Are we going to be going through the entire agenda first and then voting, or are we going to go through things as we read through them and vote for them as we go?
You know,
which would be my preference, by the way. Just
Okay. I mean, I thought for things before the board action items, we would read and vote. But when we got to the official board action items, don't we normally read through it, then have public comment, and then vote? Is that,
well,
read through all?
We do that, but we also, in the workshop meeting, we have a lengthy discussion at times about, so.
Oh, right, yeah, I thought we would.
We're combining them.
Yes, I was envisioning that each committee chair gives their report, we have a lengthy discussion, hopefully not a lengthy discussion, but lengthy comments are most welcome. And then we move on to the next committee chair's report, then we have public comment, then we come back, there might be more discussion, and then we vote.
Thank you.
But as for the corrections to the minutes, well, I guess we already did that. Do we need a voice vote on that?
We do, a roll call vote
A roll call vote. Oh, I'm sorry.
for the correct, so items
Yes,
8
for-
and 9.
Sorry? For
Items 8 and 9.
8 and 9, yes.
So are you, have you asked, oh, we do have one.
We have a second and we have a motion. Well, this goes better when the normal, the actual president is here. A little more familiar with the procedures.
Okay. So we're ready for?
We're ready for a vote, yes,
Okay,
thank you.
For all discussions completed. Okay.
Oh, sorry, is
Roll
there a
call.
discussion?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
If I abstain, do we have enough people to pass it?
Well, we have 6 members here tonight.
Do we? Okay, abstain.
Ms. McFadden DiNicola?
Yes.
And is that everybody? Yes, McFadden, Magazine, okay. Moving on to number 10, we have student representative report listed, but of course our student reps are not yet sitting with us. They will be here, I guess in September, right? They're not coming over the summer. Number 11 is our superintendent's report. I'll let you go ahead and decide what order you'd like to do that in.
I'm keeping it brief
Okay.
because I would like to save the time I'd normally spend making a presentation to introduce a couple of our new members of the leadership team. The first thing I'd like to do is just take a moment to update the board and the community on an initiative that Highland Park Public Schools is now part of, called the New Jersey Labor Management Collaborative Cohort. It's an organization that is comprised, as you can see on the screen, of 20 school districts. We are among a handful that make up Middlesex County. Metuchen was actually one of the first school districts to work with Rutgers and the other organizations you see on that slide to put this organization together. A pretty distinguished group here. We've got researchers from both Rutgers and Cornell University, and just about every public school employee labor organization is a part of this group, including the AFT, which is NJEA's, or rather I should say NEA's partner in support staff and teacher labor management. The group, which is a selective organization, it took us about a year to be part of this group, held a 2-day conference at Rutgers University. These folks on the slide in their cash clothing went to the Hyatt and took a pretty deep dive, mostly with each other, talking about ways that we can improve relationships among the board, leadership team, and the local association, HPEA. Not as much with the others in the organization. We found that while we feel we'll get a lot out of this group, we're further ahead than we thought we were. And perhaps when I'm done, Mark, who is the board member representative, could share his thoughts. But the consensus to me was we're firing on all cylinders. We definitely have room to grow when it comes to working collaboratively, board, leadership team, and HPEA, but we're certainly ahead of the game with respect to what other school districts are doing. And part of that forward thinking that we already are putting in place has to do with the fact that we have an HPEA president in Keith Presti, who is, I really feel, is genuinely committed to being honest and communicative and collaborative. He was the one who came to me about half a year ago and said, "Hey, Scott, we should go to Metuchen and check out what they're doing in the area of labor management relations, because I've heard they're doing some cool things." So we went, Keith and I visited our counterparts in Metuchen, and we actually came away with this chart that I showed the board quickly about 6 months ago, called the 7-point decision-making continuum. I'm not going to get into it in detail, but essentially it's a framework that has us considering what decisions should be made in partnership and what decisions should be made with more of a top-down driven focus. And so we had a chance to test this out a little bit. So for instance, we had a decision that came up that required what we felt was a number 4 right in the middle, which you can't read from there, but states that it is a matter that will have both parties, in this case the HPEA and leadership, making a decision jointly and co-constructing the decision, as opposed to something which we haven't come upon yet that would be more of like a number 6, which would be a matter that would have one party making a decision and informing the other party before implementation. So we like this. It's an example, though, of the kinds of strategies which we can pick up from the organization that we're part of now, and to perhaps elevate the solid work we're already doing. The majority of the time spent, at least on the first day of the 2 days, was looking at the research that Saul Rubenstein, who was a professor at Rutgers and one of the co-founders of this group, shared with us. His research, along with his co-researcher at Cornell, looks at the quantitative data, the numbers that show student achievement that results from a strong formal union management partnership. And Danny showed us all kinds of data, and we spent a majority of the day not only looking at the research that proves when you have a strong working relationship among these parties, students will do better academically. I mean, I'd love to see, and I'm sure it's out there, and if it's not, perhaps this is another line of research we could pursue, the social emotional achievement that comes out of this partnership too. I'm sure kids are role modeling on some level what they can see to be collaborative relationships among these different parties that may encourage them to be collaborative as they grow up and become adults. So we also met with some leaders, union leaders, district leaders, and board members from California. Apparently they're like ground zero right now for some of this research. So they flew them out. We met with them. And we will be part of this group from this point forward. And if we don't feel like we're getting much out of it, then we will just take a step back. It's not costing us anything. It's not a for-profit organization and doesn't charge any fees. So there's really no harm done in being part of it if we can only gain. And that's it. Any questions? I mean, I don't have much really to share, but Mark?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few words. So first, not in that picture was Darcy, who's not here this evening, who's the board president. And so Darcy was at the meeting. I was there as the chair of our negotiations committee, among other things. But this is about negotiations and good representation, a good relationship between the associations and the board. And also Mike Lassiter was there, who's the president of your association, our two new administrators. So Mike was there for all of the meetings. He was in that picture. I think the point that I took away from the meeting was that the board and the associations could put into place more permanent types of solutions for joint problem solving that would last longer than the people who are in those positions than the current people. So that is to say, boards turn over, administrators change, but you want a system in place for your district so that the way that the organizations work with each other continues to work the same way. And one example that we picked up during the meeting was, for instance, the district has working committees among teachers and administrators on things like technology. And our finance committee has meetings and discussions about technology, and yet those two committees don't talk to each other. So it would be very good, for instance, for the technology committee, a working committee of the staff, to communicate, even only through minutes and agendas, to the board about what's going on in technology, so we know more. And again, that lives past the date of people leaving the school board or leaving their positions in the district. that we have a system in place that lasts. And that's what I took out of these meetings, and it was excellent. There's really, really smart people who care about relationships between unions and management. So I'm very, very pleased that the district is part of this now. Thanks, Scott.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you for attending and getting us involved with this.
The only other thing I'd like to, I'm going to shift gears. The only thing I'd like to share with the board before I introduce our distinguished guests is a minute video that will whet your appetite for what's to come August 19th. So as the board is aware, I've spent the last 4.5 days in Washington, D.C. with my mentee, Andy Land, who's also going to be one of the 2 board representatives here starting in September. Andy was selected as a Marine All-American athlete. He was one of 100 students among 7,000 who were reviewed, who applied, and whose credentials were reviewed. It turns out not only was Andy one of 100 among a 7,000 student pool, he was one of the 100 who was selected as the last night as the Max Preps Semper Fidelis All-American Athlete of the Year, which came with it not just a distinguished title, but also a $20,000 scholarship. So I have 103 pictures, which I'm not going to show you tonight. I'll take half of them and throw them out there to you. August 19th. But I wanted Andy, and he's probably sleeping. He was so excited last night. I was too, but my curfew wasn't 11:30. Theirs was. So I guess they all felt compelled to hang out in the lounge at the JW Marriott. But he got like about an hour of sleep, so he's sleeping right now. August 19th, he'll come out, and both of us will talk. It was a very emotional, proud moment for both of us last night. So let me show you this 1-minute video. This is a video that the Marine Corps put together about the first day of 3. We spent this first day at Quantico.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're here to welcome you to this year's Battles Won Academy. And as United States Marines, we consider ourselves to be the world's finest. Because as United States Marines, we know what it means when somebody holds their ground, they stand up, and they stick to fighting until they win.
It's a huge program, and I have genuine love for it because you all are the future of this nation, and I can impact that in a positive way. You have what it takes, believe yourself.
And yes, by the way, the mentors participate in those activities too. So at about 9 o'clock, I'm going to start to crash. All right, so that's that. But now for the more exciting part of my presentation. When I got to the position I'm in now, which is my dream position, being superintendent of Highland Park Schools 4 years ago, I knew one of my missions would have to be to build what at the time was a depleted leadership team, a world-class, type A, forward-thinking leadership team. Because besides our teachers, our leaders are the most important, and of course, students, elements of the school district. And I am 1,000% confident that the 2 people who I'm recommending to the board tonight, one for the Barlow principalship and the other for the high school assistant principalship, are complementing the existing members of that world-class team. So the first thing I'm going to do is say just a few words about each, and then I'm going to ask them to come up to the podium and talk a little bit and show off in front of their families. I'm very grateful that their families are here. I did a reference check on you, Mr. Richardson, so I'm going to be reading from some of your reference material that you've probably never heard before. So. Oh, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, please. I'm sorry. The Board Personnel Committee interviewed the the candidates in the process. So I'll, of course, let them speak. Ms. Knapp doesn't need references because she has been homegrown educator here in Highland Park who established herself as the teacher every parent wanted to make sure his or her kid had at Irving School. Miss Lugo was her name at the time, and she was famous in my household. We've joked about the reasons. But she obviously proved herself as to be such a bright, articulate, and progressive-minded educator that my predecessor's predecessor felt that she needed to step into the leadership role, which is why she assumed the position of supervisor of funded programs and district initiatives. Big shoes to fill. So I do feel sorry for the person who's going to step into those shoes, but I know Jen will be available to mentor him or her. So we had over 100, I think it was 120-something applicants for the Bartle principalship. And of that number, we got it down to 18. Then we took it down to 10. Jen was one of the 10 who was interviewed. And she hit it out of the ballpark. I sat in on every phase of the interview process, so I got to see how she performed at each level. And all the people who had a chance to hear her said the same thing. She's the one. She's the one. She earned it. It wasn't because she was the internal candidate. I have been known to have upset some people here who are in the teaching ranks because they were not the internal candidates who were chosen. We are looking for the best people, not for the best internal candidates. Jen earned her spot. So without further ado, I'd like to formally introduce Jen and her family. Maybe you could introduce them when you come to the podium as my recommendation to be the person that's taking over for Mr. Benjamin as Bartle principal. Ms. Knapp.
Thank you so much. I am here with my family, my husband, Jeremy, my son, Jacob, raise your hand, and my son, Jonathan, all J's. We're all J's in our household. Lots of J's here tonight. I did bring notes, because I knew I'd be nervous up here. But first, I would like to thank Scott and the board for giving me this opportunity. I have loved and been a part of Highland Park for many years. More than I like to admit, because then it shows my age. But I began my journey in Highland Park 21 years ago when I was a student at Rutgers, and I started babysitting for families here in Highland Park, lots of different families, which led me to then doing Backyard Friends camps here in Highland Park. And when I graduated back in 2001 with my master's, I was thrilled because there was a position open at Irving Primary School for a first grade teacher. And I was lucky enough to get my first teaching position here in Highland Park, and I have been here ever since. Highland Park is an amazing district. It has supported me every step of my journey as an educational leader and given me opportunities to learn and grow while I've been here. I was a teacher on special assignment as a Title I coordinator, and then I was given the opportunity, like Scott said, to be the supervisor of funded programs. I've loved working here, and I am so excited that my educational journey gets to continue here and that I get to be Bartle's principal. I have not stopped smiling since the interview process was over. I didn't smile that much during the interview process. It was nerve-wracking, but I have not stopped smiling since, and I'm thrilled to work with the amazing staff that I have at Bartle School. And I'm excited to begin the work as a community to support our students so they can be the best versions of themselves and reach their highest potential. So thank you again for this opportunity. I can't wait to jump in with both feet. Thank you.
Coming out tonight, Jen. Thank you very much. I think my microphone wasn't working. And thanks to your family for coming out too. It's so nice to meet you guys.
Any other thoughts? I know, Ruth, you were there, I think, correct, at the second round interview? So it was, by the way, those of us in the community who might be watching tonight, we do put these folks through a very rigorous process. I would say it ranks up there with the Marine Corps Quantico obstacle course, just not on a physical level. They have to go through a very large committee review of stakeholders at the first round, including teachers, supervisors, and on occasion parents, depending on the nature of the position. And the second round always involves the board personnel committee or members of the board filling in for the board personnel committee, myself, principals. And then the third round is usually a face-to-face with me and a reference check. So, no other thoughts? I'd like to say a few words about Mr. Richardson.
I did just want to say that we're delighted to have Jen joining us, and we're all just thrilled. So thank you. Mr. Richardson, would you like to start us off?
I'll start, and then I can read a few lines, and then you can pick it up.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you
Michelle,
know that
pick it up.
you want to jump in first.
So what you don't know, Jason, is that when you left, so I step out of the interview and I walk you out, and then they're all talking, and I don't know what they're talking about. So when I go back into an interview room, I have to read the room. I have to get a vibe. And when I walked back in, everybody was quiet. I was like, oh no. I loved you when you had me at hello, you know. Yeah, because I could sense, at least from you right away, that you're about the kids, and I appreciate your social worker background and all that. But when I looked at them and I said, so what's up? I said, oh my God, we love them. I guess they had talked for a minute, and then that was it, slam dunk. The references, we call it, had some really nice things to say about you. So one person wrote, he is wonderful, exclamation mark. Be good in the role of assistant principal because he has a good heart and his greatest strength is his connection to the kids. He's down to earth and uses a non-invasive way of communicating to build rapport. Apparently took on a big project, analyzing discipline referrals to identify trends in behavior, so you have experience in that. By the way, Mr. Richardson also has a year of International Institute for Restorative Practices training under his belt. That is the organization. That's right.
That's
Hoorah! That's the institute with which we work.
Did you say hoorah?
I did. Hoorah! I'm sorry. It's like what we've been saying for the last 4 days. His other reference said. Yeah, the Highland Park guy going, right. Upon being hired, Mr. Richardson quickly made himself an indispensable member of the community. He established positive working relationships with everybody, including the child study team, the counseling department. Two things that popped out at this person's input. You're positive, which I got. I mean, I think we all got the fact that you're always smiling. And very ethical, and I love this, an excellent role model for our students. So, fantastic. Other thoughts? Anybody else who was there?
Yeah, absolutely. We were very quiet when you came back in the room because we were just like, okay, we're done. There's nothing else to say. Yeah, we were all very confident, I guess, and there wasn't anything that we didn't agree. We were all kind of impressed in all the same ways.
That's unusual.
It is unusual because we're all very different, and yeah, all of us were like, yeah, okay, the easiest interview I've ever sat in on. And there was a couple questions that we asked. We had a list of 9 questions, and the very first question, I actually said out loud, like, you're going to make me cry. I cried a lot, but it's a low bar. I'm just saying that I was touched by what you had said, because the question was, what has led you to make a career choice to become an educational leader? And there's 1,000 different ways to answer that, but you mentioned a woman named Janice West, and she was your counselor in high school, I believe. So this is, me and Ruth are sitting there as teachers, former teachers, moms, doing the tiny, tiny, tiny jobs that need to get done every single day. And then you mentioned her name, like, it was, it made me really proud. And it actually did really touch me, and you were talking about her as your mentor and the person that saw the potential in you and that you wanted to do that for other people. And I mean, there's nothing else that a human being can do that's more important than that. So that right there, I was like, okay, we're done. Like 8 more questions, but so we're so happy that you're coming here. We're so lucky to have you, and thank you to the whole family. You're dressing in maroon and white. I see. How cute is that? I love it.
Hey, Ruth, you were there.
Yeah, like right out of the gate.
You were there, right?
All in. So
Yes.
we're so lucky, so happy to have you. Thank you.
So, how about Jason? How about you come on up, introduce your family, maybe say a few words about who you are again, and go from there.
Good evening, board members, Superintendent Taylor, my family, the rest of the members of the Owl Parliament in the house. Very nice to share this evening with you all. My name is Jason Richardson, and I want to give a shout out to my family, my wife, Teresa Richardson, my daughter, Layla Richardson, and my son, Jelani Richardson. This is a bittersweet situation for me, but first and foremost, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Miss Janice West, who did pass away earlier this year. That was one of the things I touched on, and one of the highlights of my life was to be able to share my initial experience being an assistant principal in the school district that I graduated from, and have her live just long enough to see this fruition come full circle for the both of us. One thing I mentioned during both of my interviews is that I'm the youngest of about six children, but I'm the youngest to go to college and receive a degree, then to go on to receive 2 master's degrees, one from Rutgers, hoorah, Dr. Taylor. So yes, I'm very blessed to be sharing this moment with you. And speaking of hoorah, I also have to give a shout out to Andy, because out of all of the accolades he received, Dr. Taylor forgot the most prestigious one is him being a part of the selection committee that brought me to this proud district. So we got to give him a round of applause, even though he's not here. So hoorah to you too, Andy, if you're out there in our nation. And so with that being said, it's really difficult to, the first time I left home to go to William Patterson on my educational pursuit for my undergraduate degree was very difficult to leave home. I was born and raised in Irvington, so I have very established roots there in the greater Irvington community. And the first time I left, I was very unsure, but I was equally excited because I know I'm a survivor, and I know one thing that I've learned from my upbringing is to be extremely resourceful and to and fight with a purpose. And so, you know, I forged forward, and I never looked back, and I was able to come full circle, and it was very difficult to make the decision to leave home once again, a place that is extremely familiar, but meeting everyone, you know, I feel like Highland Park is a place that can be my second home. And one thing that I would like to share from my conversation with Dr. Taylor is that when I walked out and he asked, how was the selection committee? And I said, man, you guys are so cool. If I don't get the job, I'm gonna come back and visit you. We all gotta hang out. I love talking to you guys. You know, so thank you so much for going out on a limb and taking a chance on an outsider, you know, who's looking for an opportunity to push his career forward and just make his mark and help establish yourself and just and be a part of this great community. Thank you guys so much. God bless all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you, family members.
So while it's a little presumptuous of me to assume that you got the gig,
Oh,
I haven't voted on you yet, I wouldn't
That's
call
right.
you out here if there was a problem. So I think it's safe for you to go celebrate. And I think now is the time you could start to do that, because we're going to move on to the business portion of our agenda. So I want to thank you all for being here. Ms. Knapp, I'll see you probably in the next day or two. Wonderful meeting your family. and I'm sure we're going to get to know each other. So have a good night, guys. You can head out if you'd like.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, can we shake hands? Can we do a little handshake thing? Yeah, let's go shake hands. Well, now this feels weird. Like,
Oh, like, do we stand up?
hey, we can shake hands.
Congratulations, welcome. Looking forward to- Yeah.
I already hugged Jack.
Just kind of convince them to take you out to Thomas Sweet Ice Cream in Brunswick, Hudson Ave.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Dr. Taylor. Dr.
Stay here, sorry.
I feel like we missed an opportunity for cake.
I know, we didn't get cake. That's a shame.
Should have had something.
I should have maybe not worn shorts too, this seems kind of unduly.
Yeah, well,
That does conclude my report.
Wonderful. Well, that was the happy part of the meeting. Thank you to the personnel members who attended Mr. Richardson's interview in particular. I wish that I could have come. Okay, we're going to move on to our board action items. So as usual, well, not as usual, in this joint meeting, we will have each committee member report out and go through the agenda to the extent it's not self-explanatory. We'll then have public comment, and then we will go through the agenda items very briefly again and vote. So, curriculum. Michelle, would you like to make a curriculum report?
sure. So, I'm just opening up after all the handshaking and everything,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
still looking for my agenda. I'm sorry.
I have your agenda here, but your notes might be...
Yeah, the notes.
Oh, your notes, yeah. Okay. There's only one item on the
So
agenda.
yeah, we had a pretty quick meeting. It wasn't very lengthy. This is kind of downtime for curriculum, but there is a lot to discuss because sorry, wrong one.
Give the computer a chance to,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
to rumble to life.
Okay.
All right.
We discussed some of the different curriculum that is being rewritten and also updated. And one of the things that we wanted to include in the elementary health curriculum was the concept of consent and bodily autonomy. So we had a brief discussion about what those things are and why those things are important at the, that would be the Irving and the Bartle schools. And we actually found a curriculum that's already made and includes all of that. Also is just rich with resources for us to take a look at. So I sent that over to Dr. Taylor, and he's looking at that to work from as we tweak our health curriculum. And then we spoke a little bit about the follow-up that we discussed, the home economics curriculum, unfortunately, because we had to get rid of that program and no one wanted to. We're working on ways to integrate some of the components of the home economics curriculum into the other classes that we have currently in the high school. So I don't know what that would look like in detail, but that is something that we are working on, folding in some of those components. So again, don't have details for you, but that is something that we discussed and is in the works. The agenda is super, super light. Basically, it is one item, right? And it's basically just the field trips. I'm sorry. Page 5, thank you. I keep flipping past it. It's such a small thing. I just keep going up and then down. So it's just the approval of the field trip requests, and there's only one field trip. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.
I have no questions.
Yes.
Thank you for that report. Mark, Finance and Facilities, please.
Yes, thank you. So we met earlier today, and went over the agenda, and we also discussed, I brought up something I'll be talking about at the August meeting, which is the demographics, number of students coming into the district, especially as some of the new building has come online, excuse me, or will come online. And I will be presenting a report at the August 19th meeting on the current numbers, the trends, et cetera. Year over year, though, I believe that we have 24 fewer students this June than we had last June. The number has been pretty consistent, but it's just slightly lower right now. And again, I'll talk about what I think and what the committee has reviewed as trends for the demographics. So as far as our voting items number 1 through 11 are bill lists, cafeteria bill lists, treasury reports, board secretary reports, Board of Ed certifications, budget transfers, and many of those are older. They've been put off because of the auditors being in and reviewing them, so we have the correct numbers for our voting. Item 12 is the approval of travel and related expense reimbursement reports, which is up to date. So that's all of the reporting side of things. Item 13 is approval for contractors. These are mostly contractors for educational services, things like nursing services, psychological evaluations, bedside instruction, and so on. Item number 14 is approval of the contract for the lease of the technology equipment. And I did want to say something. There has been a number of questions about this lease. I've seen some on the internet. I've had some calls and requests. What is the lease? How are we leasing the equipment? Will we own the equipment? And I think it's the word that has confused people is the word lease, which is what the bank calls it. They call it a lease purchase agreement. In layman's terms, for any of those of us who bought a car versus leased a car or bought a home, this is like, very much like, it's not identical, but it's like a loan for a car, what we're doing. So we are taking a 4-year loan, and again, the bank calls it a lease purchase agreement. The collateral for the loan is the equipment, and at the end of the lease, which again is like a loan, we will own the equipment. So at the end of the 4 years, we will have value of whatever those Chromebooks and laptops are worth at the end. And that could be a considerable amount. So again, think of this as you would think of as a traditional loan you take out with your bank. For some reason, I don't really understand it, but for some reason, in this case, U.S. Bancorp, leasing and finance company, has called it a lease purchase agreement. But it is a loan for 4 years for the money paid in 4 equal parts. Item 15 is purchase of teacher laptops. Those are laptops that are part of this agreement. These are for the classes which don't have laptops currently, or have laptops that are in such bad shape that they would have been replaced anyway by purchasing new ones. So the teaching staff in classrooms will all have district-provided equipment. Item 16 is approval of the contract to the low bidder, which is STS Education. Item 17 is acceptance of reallocated Title I grant funds. And I believe this is because, just look at the notes here. Yes, this is because this is the first year that we're receiving these grant funds. So we have to vote on it. Item 18 is renewal of a number of our insurances. So Utica is our commercial business umbrella insurance. workman's comp, excess umbrella liability, etc. Item 19 is an amendment to the contract with Italian Global Services. That's our custodial service. This amount is, in fact, what was budgeted. So the amount of savings was $54,000. We're reducing from 14.05 to 13.05 full-time equivalent custodians. That's what was budgeted, and this is within that budget. The amounts in this amendment. Number 20 are 3 out-of-district placements, and item 21 is the acceptance from the class of 1979 of $3,000 to be used by Highland Park High School. And thank you to the class of 1979.
I should clarify, it appears that Mr. Lassiter would like to give that money to Ms. Puccio, the librarian, to purchase new furniture.
Oh, great.
Since much of what we have there is old, especially the
Great.
chairs.
Great. Okay, and that is the full report.
Thank you so much.
Lengthy report.
Number 20, the out-of-district placement.
Yes.
That's not a sort of a special education placement, right? Those are students who will be taking classes at Middlesex County. I'm talking about finance number 20. Am I correct that those are not special education placements, but simply students? Oh, they are?
I can clarify. So these are our students who graduated the GLOW program.
Oh, I see.
So
Yeah, they are.
after having gone through the structured learning experiences,
Right.
being placed out in the local
Right.
businesses, we're now going to support their associate's degree
Oh,
pursuit.
that's wonderful.
And as the public should be aware, and the board knows, school districts are responsible for these students until the age of 21. So this is the natural order of their growth.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
That is wonderful. What happens then in terms of them being able to continue education past that?
Well,
Right.
it's up to them then to move forward. But most of these students are 18.
Right.
They might not be on the traditional 2-year associate's degree tracks, but they could be getting close to that point at which they can graduate with an associate's degree.
No, that's exciting. Okay, next up is personnel, which... I apologize.
I
Excuse
did
me.
want to follow up on the technology equipment. So, Mark.
Yes.
So the $373,000 is divided into 4 years of
Yeah.
payout, so it's $96,000
Right.
this year and something similar to that in
Yes.
the following years. So we will own those those laptops at the end of the 4 years.
Yeah. There are three.
And theoretically, because they will have some value, we'll either maintain them and keep them past that date, or we can trade them back in.
Correct.
Or have some
Correct.
credit toward the next purchase, which would probably be coming around that time.
Yes, there's 3 components to the lease. I've been doing more work with Linda because this is the calling it a lease is so confusing. So we started talking about it and we went into more detail. There are 3 components. There are the Chromebooks for the students. There are the laptops for the teachers, and then there's part of the network equipment which we would have purchased anyway. If you add that all up, continues to be less than we would have spent on replacing old and broken equipment. So we're saving money by doing this. In addition to that, we'll save money on curriculum because we won't be buying books.
We'll be replacing some books with some with
that's
online.
right. Yes, so some of the books will be replaced by online materials, which are, a fraction of the cost of books, which then become outdated. And we'll have this ownership, which means at the end, maybe we get even only 10 cents on the dollar or 20 cents on the dollar for the remaining equipment, but that can go towards the next lease, depending on enrollment and how many we replace and so on. So yeah, that's the nitty-gritty of it.
I know we've talked about this
Many times,
multiple
many
times, but
times.
just to remind people, as far as the maintenance of the Chromebooks that go to the students' How does that work? Do
Right.
we have a responsibility as a board, as the owner of them?
Yes.
And what is the responsibility of the students and their parents?
Sure. It's a little complicated, but we are responsible for maintaining them. We are offering insurance to families at a fairly low rate, and that insurance will cover the families for at numbers that can go up to 40, but which will be significantly less for families that the plan is that for families that can't afford it, it'll be significantly less than that, and that will cover things like broken, lost, stolen equipment. So yeah, there's a plan in place for that.
So initially, we were looking at spending about $78,000 for this year.
Yeah, but we had to add in the network equipment that we couldn't do on capital, so that got added to the lease.
That got added to the lease.
Yeah, which we would have spent anyway because we're upgrading the network system out of capital.
Out of capital.
Yeah, but we couldn't do all of it in capital, and the part we didn't do in capital is going into the lease. That's why I said it's kind of complicated.
Kind of complicated, but so right now you're still saying that we're somewhere near breaking even compared to what we would have spent.
Yes. And probably ahead. Between the curriculum and owning the equipment, we're probably ahead.
And once you add in the cost of insurance, that's spread out either to the school district or to the parents?
I think we're even more ahead because we will be collecting money. The experience of other school districts, which we've studied, shows that they are getting enough back from the families to cover the breakage in the equipment. And typically, I'm not saying we're not in the insurance business, but typically they've made more than they've had to spend.
Including the portion that's picked up by the district?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then originally when we were looking at the $65,000, it was for 950 Chromebooks, which was inclusive of the units for the teachers?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't.
That's the way it was presented.
That was incorrectly presented.
Okay. Now, so the 160 units for the teachers, how many teachers do we have in the district? Approximately 200.
Approximately 200.
So right now, we're at that point where only about 40 teachers have working.
If we're lucky.
If we're lucky. Okay.
And of course, between the capital expenditure and the money that's being amortized through the loan, I'm going to call it a loan now, we're upgrading this antiquated network system, which has needed it for years.
And the anticipation is for what kind of lifespan for the teachers' laptops?
4 years.
About 4 years also? Okay, thank you.
What kind of laptops will the teachers be receiving? Do we know yet?
Yeah, they'll be Dell added. It's in this.
Oh, it's in there, okay.
Nice Dell machines.
I see. So they're likely to be more enduring than some of the Chromebooks.
Yeah, I
One
mean,
hopes.
given modern equipment, I can't say. I know a lot about equipment, but a machine like this or an equivalent Dell, it can clearly last more than 4 years, and given the kind of speeds and chips and memory and disk in these modern machines, it could surely last more than 4 years, but we're not planning for it to last more.
Right, right. And certainly those will be in the hands of teachers, so.
And the old, and the old machines that have been on people's desks have been the, kinds of machines that we couldn't upgrade the operating system.
Right.
So this is going to be this isn't going to happen. I want to say everyone's excited now. We're saving money and we're doing something good. This is not going to happen overnight. This is a massive job to roll these out, to get them into teachers' hands, students' hands, and it's going to happen through the summer and the fall. But I have tremendous confidence that this is going to get done well.
I scheduled them.
I was going to say, that was going to be my question. Can we talk about the rollout a little bit, or are we prepared?
So I've scheduled a meeting in about, I think it's 2 weeks, with John, Ms. Lassiter, Ms. Osemier, and Dr. Nicosia to discuss what we're going to do. One of the things we're contemplating, this by email, is potentially having an early dismissal just for middle and high school students sometime in October or November, so we can provide the machines in a methodical, careful way instead of just haphazardly trying to get them through during the day. We are still planning to have a summer orientation for families of the middle and high school students so that they can become acquainted with the Chromebooks, as well as get to know what will be the new cell phone use policy at the high school, which is going to prohibit students from using their cell phones except during lunchtime. And we actually have a policy on the agenda tonight to be looked at that codifies that. That's all going to happen during the summer.
And which the administration very much wanted, that policy.
And the teachers.
I'm sure.
Right. Speaking of the issues that we've had with the cell phones, what kind of filters and safeguards are we going to have on these Chromebooks to avoid having the same issues with the Chromebooks that we have with the cell phones?
So you talk about safety in terms of the use of the internet on the Chromebooks. Well, Dr. Nikosia made a presentation in June. I think it was the June 3rd board meeting, and she talked about the filtering systems. I can't speak to the technical aspects of that, but she did spend quite some time, a couple of slides, talking about newly purchased filtering systems that they've incorporated to keep tabs on kids. We can also, there's a balance here between being Big Brother and also making sure that we're protecting our students. So we don't want to overdo it. Students who use the Chromebooks we're going to give them will only be able to access certain sites because they'll be locked into using our network when they're here. They can't just wander onto another network. So we do have tight control somewhat as to where they can go.
And this is very standard when we studied the other districts that have done this. And of course, Dr. Nikosia was part of that at her past district. This has worked pretty successfully. And when I talk to people in Edison, they've gone through this pretty successfully. So I think that kind of monitoring should work pretty well.
I just have a question about the insurance. I know you mentioned this, I probably just didn't hear it. So what is the plan for families who may have concerns about the insurance payment, free and reduced lunch? Do we have a plan for offering?
They're working on that plan, but we've made it clear that we want policies for families with free lunch and reduced lunch. But I don't have the details yet. That's being done by the administration, not by the board.
And then I just wanted not to open up a whole other can of worms, but the idea of the now cell phones being prohibited and what that says about our discipline code updating to include that new.
Can you go a little closer to your mic?
Sorry.
I'm a little deaf too. So.
The fact that now we have this new prohibition on the use of cell phones and how we're going to now integrate that into the discipline code. Sorry, but that's discipline code just keeps evolving.
Mm-hmm. And it will probably.
So is the discipline?
When does the discipline study group?
Right. I don't remember what it's. Yeah. When does the discipline study group? I'm sorry. I just said what you said.
Thank you.
What's the timeline for that committee /group /
Well, we're going to have our first study group meeting to look at the code of conduct in the first week of October. But Monique, are you concerned about adapting to, like, what we're going to do basically if a student starts pulling out a cell phone?
Well, yeah, I want to know, like, what, I'm not
So-
a big fan of this, honestly. I am in a way as an educator, they are a distraction in the classroom, but I do want to know then what are going to be the repercussions and what's the protocol and how strict is this going to be.
So right now, I'm pulling up the code of conduct. We do have something in stone right now. I mean, we might want to reflect on how it's working out if we have repeat incidences, but if you look at...
Is there there's no current general bar on the use of cell phones in school, right? Of course, you're expected to do what the teacher says. If she says, put your cell phone away, put your cell phone away.
Like right now, there's a section on electronic devices. So if a student is refusing to put electronic device away, it's considered a tier 2 offense, which doesn't call for suspension or anything or that. But am I missing? But well, you know what? We can discuss this at the study group.
Level now in terms of it sounds like it. So I think that needs to be a conversation for the discipline study group for sure.
Is there any way to move that forward if we're going to approve this policy, for the beginning of the school year? Is there any way to move a discipline study group?
I mean, that's something we could do as a leadership team. I can tell you right now, the informal conversations we've had as a leadership team, the principals, about this, what has led us to think about how it was done, which was basically, look, if a student pulls out a cell phone in class and starts making a phone call or texting, the cell phone's taken away, brought to the main office. I'm going down the right path with your question, right? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And then the student has to pick it up at the end of the day. If it happens a second time, a parent or guardian has to pick it up. I don't know what happens if it's a third time.
Oh, I didn't even know, okay, so I didn't know that.
Well, we haven't, that hasn't been in place because we've had a bring your own device policy at the high school. We've had a need for it. But that's the way it was done before the BYOD policy. So in our leadership team conversations, we've been reflecting on how it was done. And the principals claim to have had some success with it. Actually, the principal, Mr. Lassiter, because everybody else came on board when we had the BYOD policy. So, I mean, frankly, I support that at this point. I mean, there's nothing much more than, you take the phone away, have the student pick it up at the end of the day. We're not removing the student from the class setting. If it happens a third time, that I don't know what will be the reaction for. So that's something we can discuss.
That's why, yeah, I'm just thinking about all these possible scenarios and then how the discipline study group would be discussing these issues.
Yeah, Mr. Lassiter did say that when they did have that policy in place, it did work very, very successfully. Yeah. And he feels, and I believe the teachers feel that there's a much less disruption in the classroom if such a policy were in place.
Certainly, we would need to have it codified and publicized so that everybody knows, what the constraints are. So, what do you think about an October meeting date? Do you think that sort of should we try to move it up so there's something in place before the school year begins? What do you think?
I think it would make sense, but
is that
well? If we're expecting the students and the teachers to know what to do on September 1st, we need to have something that's discussed and arrived at before then.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I'll leave it up to Mr. Richardson and Mr. Lassiter to propose something, but I'm sure that they will have something in place by then. And I'll share it with the discipline study group. We can reflect on it come October. But
I think
no
the discipline study
student's
group
gonna
would
get
probably
in
like to
trouble.
look at it before it's...
We're not going to have any problems until like November when they start testing the waters.
Because we are voting on the first part of that tonight with the student use of privately owned tech, because it talks about taking away cell phones in that. So, and then about how it needs to be as installed into the student handbook before the school year.
I agree.
I didn't hear you very well. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Because if 2363, which is under policy, item page 2, it talks about students who use mobile phones in violation of this policy may have their phones confiscated. So we're voting on the first portion of that tonight, but then the expectation is that it would be put into the student handbooks before the beginning of the school year. Right. So that way the students would also be notified. So we're voting on it now over the summer, and then Mr. Lassiter and Mrs. Aseme would put it into their guides for the teachers to understand the protocol, and the students would say, well, it's right here.
Mm-hmm. And what you have the advantage of not having to be dependent on a publisher, since we're not purchasing published handbooks this year. We cut that from the budget.
Right, they can be printed out on just paper.
Put
right?
on, yeah, put on.
And I think before we decide to impose any disciplinary consequences of the sort, contacting parents, suspending people, that kind of thing, we'd probably want to have the discipline study committee, or whatever its current name is, get its input to you, right? Okay. Cool, thank you.
I did want to say one thing back to Ruth. If I remember correctly from the one-to-one presentation, the filtering software was supposedly able to also function outside of the school. So it was more based in the computers themselves, rather than based in the district. So that way when the students took the laptop home, they were still prohibited from going to certain websites, and the history of them trying to get to those websites is also available to come back to the school when they come back.
John, that's accurate, correct?
If any students...
That's accurate.
If any students
software, I saw you nodding your head, yes, that the software is on the
with
computer.
Nanny, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So if any students are listening, just pay heed. Thank you, Rob.
I just wanted to mention that this computer is on loan for the board members that we've been on the board now for 5 years, and I got it my first year. And it's in great working order, and it's up to date. I mean, it's a Chromebook. It's not a jet fighter, but does what it's supposed to do, and it's still, in good working order. Because I was thinking of the timeline and thinking, God, in 4 years, we'll be on hoverboards and everyone will have wings or whatever, but that's not been the case. And I feel like very confident with this plan that we're giving them something to work with that will be functional at the end of 4 years.
In most cases.
In most cases. And also, this has not been a technology-driven curriculum thus far, and I hope that it never will be. I hope that that is something that is used as a tool, which I believe all of us are on the same page. So, that being said, I feel like this is a really necessary investment at this period in time. It's just important that we have the tools we need, but I would also urge the rest of my board members to think about what we can do for the, for lobbying for Wi-Fi through the town. I feel like this is an equity issue. It's beyond unfair. It's an equity issue that is greater than the schools can handle. We really do need town-wide Wi-Fi if we're going to serve our constituents, our citizens, whatever. I feel like that's something we should probably lend our voices to.
Perhaps we could renew that discussion with the borough at some point soon. Yeah, no, I know. It's a big lift it's a big lift for everybody, right? Any other comments on finance or discussion of finance? All right, I'm now going to carefully move on without interrupting anybody else to personnel and communication, which is me. We met last week. We discussed the various open positions that we're still looking to hire people. Members of the public can see what those are by going to the website. There should be a link to AppleTrack, which is our online application system. So if people are curious about what is still outstanding. We talked about taking action to improve our minority recruiting efforts. In other words, to attempt to enlarge our pool of candidates so that our teaching staff and other staff members more closely reflects the diversity of our students. And Scott, I know you were going to reach out to someone with a recruiting consulting business. Is any news from that?
Nope. I have a meeting with Elaine Davis from Montclair University on August 5th. One of her lines of work is to do recruitment for minority candidates. I appreciate Chris Woodward's suggestion that we look to outside if we need help, and sometimes the simplest things are right there in front of you. The CJ Pride, which is the organization we joined of school districts trying to recruit as a group minority candidates, didn't pan out. We represented Highland Park at their recruiting fair, minority recruiting fair. And I was told by Ms. Osemier and Mr. Laster that the vast majority of candidates were actually not minorities. So it's a $2,000 fee. My thinking is we should not be paying that much money for something that didn't work. And if anything, diversify those funds to working with somebody whose specialty is this in a more intimate one-to-one environment. So I'll let you know after August 5th.
That's great. I'm glad it's happening so soon. Thank you. I know, and you were going to reach out to Ms. O as well. She had expressed some interest in helping us.
Yeah, I did. She's going to get back to me. She's actually at Teachers College right now for a diversity conference. So.
Okay, well, she only do so much diversity-related stuff at once. Thank you. And we did our monthly review of personnel movement, looking to see if there were sort of patterns about people transferring between schools, and there was nothing out of the ordinary that was concerning. Okay, the agenda is pretty self-explanatory. We have some resignations, maternity leaves. I'm not going to read every item. I'm just going down to see if there's anything particularly noteworthy. A couple of transfers of staff from one school to another. Slowly scrolling. We have an interim principal that I'm going to be that Scott is recommending to be appointed. An interim principal at Bartle to cover the period before Ms. Knapp is able to leave her current responsibilities and move into the principal position. Personnel committee members, were we all present? I think we were all present. Yeah. For the interviews, we interviewed 3 candidates. They came to us at the very end of the process, teachers and educational professors educational professionals had already done at least one round of interviews, and the candidate, Dennis Merolda, is really excellent. Did you want to say a few words about him, or?
No, I'm sorry, I don't have the line of reference
right.
quotes, but
It's only for 2 months.
I do meet with all the finalists, so I want the board and the community to be aware that there's a vetting process that comes through me too.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
and one of the things I look for the most, I often tell candidates when they're with me that this is their position to lose, not to earn, because I do trust that the people referring them to me have done their job. But I'm looking for somebody when I'm in that session who's a good fit for us. I mean, it's one thing to have the skill sets, but I have to do what I can in a half hour to find this personal quality that I think is going to be connection. And all the candidates you see before you, I know are people who are supportive of our strategic plan. For instance, number 19, the guidance counselor, Tara Young, is a lot of her work is in the area of working with students with behavioral challenges. Mm-hmm. She's relatively new, but she spent most of her internship time working in a school for at-risk children, as opposed to just a general education setting. So that's an example of somebody who I think is a good fit for our focus.
Wonderful. Yeah, I didn't mean to mischaracterize the hiring process. Sorry, it's initially a committee involving teachers, parents sometimes. Mm-hmm. I think you're present as well. Is that right? Are you present for the first round interviews?
Correct. I mean, in the case of the assistant principalship, Ms. Ducey, were you on that committee? There was like 18 people on that committee, something like that. Or 15 or 18, close to that. Right, I heard 3 students. So yeah, that's how stakeholder-ish we can get.
And then there's a second round with administrators usually and a few board members and Scott. And then finally, the third interview is just with Scott. And of course, this is a decision that Scott makes and recommends to us. It's not a decision that the board members make in the first instance.
And speaking of the process, just so you know, we have the first round interviews for Jen Knapp's position that she's vacating this Thursday. This Thursday, we're meeting 8 candidates. We have 3 internal candidates of the 8.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think the word is out there that if you show your mettle as a teacher and you want to become a leader, there's a track if you want it. If you can prove yourself.
That's great. We hope teachers feel that way. Let's see. Anything else exciting? We have a maternity replacement appointment. The guidance counselor Scott just told us about. We have Ms. Knapp and Mr. Richardson that we heard about earlier. A new paraprofessional, 2 new paraprofessionals, 3 new paraprofessionals, slowly scrolling. Is this a new basic skills math interventionist at Bartle, or is this somebody moving to a new position?
I'm sorry, what number?
Number 25, Jennifer Allen, basic skills math interventionist.
So this is the new position that we created thanks to Title I funding, brand new position.
Okay.
Somebody from outside who is looking for a part-time position.
Wonderful.
So, yep.
We have Ms. Takix coming back. Takix? I thought it was Takix. In any event, Rebecca Takix, who was I think a maternity replacement, or
yep. She did a great job for us.
Yeah, that's right. She was a long-term substitute a couple of years ago.
Recruited her back.
And she is now coming back in a full-time position, teaching special education with a math focus. We have a new middle school math teacher, Mr. Coate, a new special education teacher at Bartle, Ms. Phibbs, a couple of other stipends, Schedule B positions. Ms. Baldizone is going to be the EPIC coordinator at Bartle, and there's a correction in that regard. You'll see the agenda does not have any amount listed for the stipend. The amount there, and I'm looking at, well, Linda, you know this because you gave it to me. For EPIC school, for the Bartle School EPIC coordinator, 50%, the amount of the stipend is $1,033. Other Schedule B positions, some more transfers. I should have probably written this up so I could say this more quickly. Summer appointments, handled with care training. Come on, my computer is now frozen. Home instruction. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask. I should have asked this at our meeting. Number 44, Nurtured Heart Training. Is that in connection with the new program at Bartle?
Yes, that's correct. That's the behavior therapy program.
The therapeutic program at Bartle. Okay.
Started up. Yep.
And we just want to make sure we follow up with that there will also be trained substitutes available. in the district? So it won't just be the principal staff that are trained, but also substitutes?
Yeah, so what we'll be doing after these folks are trained is we're going to ask them to turnkey to some of the other individuals who we're thinking would move out of the classroom if there was a vacancy here, and then we would subfill the position for the person who we're training.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So there's a
Yep.
paraprofessional who is working in, let's say, Ms. Salerno's general education class, who we train to back up this individual, who might be, let's say in this case, Ms. Cambisis, who's out. Then we would find a sub for the Ms. Salerno paraprofessional and have that person go into the behavior support program.
That's wonderful. And the program does provide a substitute when their clinician
Correct,
is absent?
it does.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
It does.
And do we think turnkey training, I mean, are you satisfied that turnkey training is enough for positions of this sort, requiring this kind of special training? Do we think that's...
I can ask Ms. Boudin about.
Maybe just, yeah, if we could get some
I
just
can follow up about that if you'd
reassurance on
like.
that point. I mean, I assume that she believes that's enough since
Okay.
that's what we're doing. But we do want to make sure that the people that go in are, highly qualified, not in the statutory sense, but in the intuitive sense. Okay, translators, let me find a written copy that'll move a little faster. Translators, extended testing time, handle with care, nurtured heart. More translators, Title III, Immigrant Handbook, Welcome Handbook. I jumbled that. And staff summer hours. Okay, I believe that concludes the personnel agenda. Is there any discussion or questions?
I just wanted to ask about number 46, the welcome handbook. Is that something that we're preparing for the district-wide parents or just for Irving and Bartle?
I can ask Ms. Schlesinger.
Okay. I
Not
hadn't
sure.
heard anything about it. I think it's a really wonderful sounding idea, but I wanted to hear more details.
My impression was that it was district-wide, but we should find out.
Okay.
That's mine. Not sure
I'll
where I
email
heard
you
that.
back, Michelle.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or concerns or points of discussion, personnel related?
Quick question,
Yes.
17 and 18, between Mr. Moraldo and Jen Knapp, there's a week overlap. Is that customary?
A 4-day overlap, correct, from Monday to Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Merle is an experienced building administrator, so the hope is that, number one, there would be a normal transition, and number two, perhaps he could be a bit of a mentor, perhaps? I mean, that was a thought.
Thank you.
To Ms. Knapp. Okay, let's move on to equity and excellence. Monique, what did I forget? Policies. I forgot policy. Ugh,
Come on, you're on the committee.
it's a nightmare. I'm sorry.
is a
Mark is up again. I apologize, guys.
So, we spent a lot of time at our policy committee reviewing 5,200 attendance, but not the policy, rather the regulation. So with certain policies, I'm losing, pardon me.
Yes, take your time.
It's cold in here.
I find it
Okay.
delightful, but I'm sorry.
Got my voice back. There are regulations that go with the policy. So these are the regulations that are in place, will be in place for the schools regarding attendance. When you can miss a class, when you're allowed to miss a day, when you can't, what do you need to bring in to show that you were out sick? All of those discussions we spent hours and hours talking about, and this is what we've come up with.
10 pages.
It's complex. It's very, very complex.
It's like the tax code. There's so many different situations people had.
It is like the tax code, yes. So the other one that we have been talking about for quite a while is the privately owned technology. This is because as we're handing equipment out on loan to students, some students will want to bring in their own technology. And this goes into what are the procedures and policies and circumstances around the students bringing in their own equipment. So those are the two that we finally came to terms with. And then just to complete it before questions, we have the policies and regulations for second reading. Complaints regarding instructional materials was either a missing policy or just a minor update. 4150, I think, was missing. 4152 is just a cite to the state regulation, but 7523 is the policy which concerns the district providing equipment to the students, and that's gone through first reading. This is second reading. If we approve it tonight, this will be in a new policy, or not new, but an updated policy.
Any questions, comments, concerns, or discussion?
2363, under the approval process for students who are bringing their own technology, it says submitting the signed acceptable use agreement to the high school main office.
We should change that.
Oh, we should change that.
That's first reading.
Good, thank you. Which page is this on?
Are you suggesting it be middle and high school?
Page 3 in the middle.
Page 3, I see it.
Because it's for the middle school and
Right.
high school.
Wait, oh, I see. We changed it in one place and didn't change it in the other. Okay.
I'll have to remember to do that.
In the main
For the second read.
office. Okay.
So you'll get that to Susan or to the appropriate
Could
person?
you, Scott, could you
Yeah, I'll
get
take
that
care
to
of it.
Susan?
It's a simple
Yeah.
additional word.
Rob, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, now I believe that I can correctly state we're moving on to equity and excellence. Monique, do you have a report for us?
I do. We actually met twice, so I do have 2 meetings to report on. I'll try to go through them as quickly as I can without rushing the content. This is some important discussion we were having around the memorandum of agreement with law enforcement and education officials. So I'll start with our May 12th meeting. So look at the notes here so I can refresh my memory. We did begin our meeting with discussing the memorandum and how we wanted to approach expressing our concerns with different elements of it, or even just questions we may have, or points of clarification. And we decided to kind of work on an addenda item. Just to go back, I know we've talked about this at almost every board meeting that I've presented. This has come up over the past few board meetings, but just to give a brief overview, again, the Memorandum of Agreement with Law Enforcement is a required document that all schools in New Jersey, all school districts are required to sign and execute in partnership with their local police department. And it's just intended to be a framework for kind of how to handle behavioral substance abuse issues in partnership with the law enforcement. So the idea is that the school district has the support of their local law enforcement, and the law enforcement likewise has the support of the district with addressing and hopefully redirecting our students before they get too caught up in some serious possible criminal behavior. And in some instances, it's determining how to respond, what the response is to those behaviors. So I did, and you guys have an actual link to the PDF file, the 70-page MOA, which we have been going through line by line. I think we're probably the only district, or one of a few, in New Jersey that are actually looking at this document, which I think typically just gets signed off on year to year. But we did just want to take a look at it. We did that in our May 12th meeting, started to do that, and decided to pick that up in our subsequent meeting in July. So I will continue discussing what we talked about on the MOA when I get to the July 8th notes. The second half of our May meeting involved us meeting our new youth officer, or who we think will be the new youth officer. I'm not sure if he's been officially designated as such by the police department, but Officer Brian O'Mara met with us, and at this point, we think he's going to be our next liaison with the Highland Park Police Department. He introduced himself and told us a little bit about his background, his experience working with youth as an after-school counselor and a summer school counselor before becoming a police officer. He's been on the HPPD here for 12 years. He's from East Brunswick. And he also has assisted Sergeant Corbello in teaching the LEAD program at the high school. So he does have some sense of the school, overall school community, and he feels quite comfortable, and he's really excited and happy to be taking over this role. We discussed our school liaison model. We wanted some clarification on what the capacities, or the capacities through which we're using our youth officer services. Scott did confirm that the youth officer, who will be Officer O'Mara, we presume, is not regularly present in the schools. I know this has been a point of discussion in the past. He is contacted when we do have an issue that rises to the level of police engagement. Liaison leads he leads presentations for students and parents, and he cited a couple instances. They have career information fairs or graduation and prom presentations he will be involved with. This campaign hosts Lose the Most, and I think that's about parents hosting teen parties where there may be drinking and alcoholic beverages involved. So those sort of initiatives he'll be involved in facilitating or partnering with the district. He also talked about providing security for class trips as needed, providing a presence in the vicinity of the high school after school hours in the event that the principal calls in support. Let's say if there's an issue brewing between students, a potential fight after school, which does happen from time to time, the police presence will not necessarily be in the schools, but just kind of in the vicinity to hopefully prevent any sort of incident. Scott confirmed that any calls that go out to the HPPD have to come from the principal, Scott himself, or Elizabeth Asamoah, and we're really talking about the high school in these instances. Officer O'Mara also talked about befriending parents, guardians, and families of students as an important part of their role, and I know that was something that we know that Sergeant Cabello took very seriously and made really a big part of who he was and the role that he filled. So I think Officer O'Mara is going to look to continue that. Interestingly enough, sometimes students invite our youth liaisons to lunch with them. So he may be invited to lunch with a group of students and may come in for that. And then lastly, teaching the LEAD program, formerly DARE. And we talked about that a little bit, so I'll get to that in the notes. Officer O'Mara did talk about the culture of the HPPD and how, and I think police departments in general are trying to change their culture with regards to children and students looking to intervene and not be so quick to arrest kids. Talks about that and promoting meetings with kids and parents to see what can be worked out to prevent an arrest. So we asked for some more details about the LEAD program at this point, and he explained that LEAD stands for Law Enforcement Against Drugs. It is kind of the new DARE program. DARE actually switched its curriculum back in 2012-13, which I did not realize. It's been that long that DARE has no longer been the model program. So LEAD is an evidence-based curriculum that is being implemented at the middle school level. It's based on the top good programs by the Menendez Foundation, and it's designed to empower children with SEL skills and substance prevention skills. It's from their website. Didn't do a whole lot of research on that, but that is the basis for the LEAD program. Officer O'Mara indicated that there was some data that was done on the LEAD program and that show that there's a decrease in some of the behaviors that they targeted through the curriculum at the middle school level. However, at the elementary level, there were some increases that were shown, so I think the idea was that's why it's not being offered at the elementary level at this point.
Sorry.
Not HP, and just generally. He's
Okay.
talking about, yeah, so sorry, I didn't clarify.
No.
If that was what you were thinking? Yeah, okay. So apparently there was some national or state level sort of research done. But
Do you know
we
who
talked
the
about...
research was done by?
No, that's a good question. But we talked about the fact that last year LEAD was not taught at the middle school here because we had our own internally created curriculum dealing with social emotional learning and the same sort of themes that we imagine would be dealt with in the LEAD program. So I think that that's something the committee members all agreed we want to see continued and not necessarily see phased out and be replaced by a LEAD program per se. So yeah, so we're looking to keep the framework that our teachers developed with that district emphasis on SEL, and then Officer O'Mara did talk about possibly his interest anyway in starting LEAD at Bartle. So I think that's something we need to really look to continue discussing. Committee members did agree that any use of the LEAD program will need to mesh with the curriculum developed by teachers and provide a supportive net for students. So again, that is to be continued, I am sure. And picked up by curriculum.
Can we just not have that discussion? Can we just save the time and not have that discussion, though?
I thought we had decided that LEAD wasn't.
I don't have the hard history on, I thought so myself, but apparently there seems to be a renewed interest.
From the Bartle community?
From the new liaison, that he really feels like this is something that would be beneficial to our school community, correct?
I'm going to look it over. I already asked for a copy, so I'll share with the curriculum committee, of course.
So
but just to be clear, the idea is that there's no agreement that this is going to happen, obviously. Okay. So he just said he has an interest in.
Well,
this was what was presented to us.
Yes.
And we discussed it.
Yes.
And that's where it is.
That's all it is. Yeah.
I just don't feel the need
to even discuss is what you're saying.
Further, but thank you.
Is LEAD coming back to the middle school this year, or is that's also one of the subjects of discussion? I got it.
No, that was not a subject of discussion.
Oh, okay.
Was, as far as I can recall, that it was clear that we are continuing with our.
I see. We're not adding.
He was only interested in talking about Bartle.
Yeah, clearly, yeah.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you.
So heads up that this is something that, again, I think should continue to be at least confirmedly set in stone. Which way are we going?
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for May. Let's move on to July, which is back to MOA. I'm sorry, this has just been like part 3, 4, 5. I'm not sure what part we are on with this mammoth document.
Well, thank you for finally really taking a look at it, which it's years in the...
I have to give kudos to Scott, too, really, for going through this as a superintendent, which...
I can't believe I read it.
I read the whole thing.
The whole thing, yeah. I mean, you get the word for that, because...
73 pages?
73 pages, yeah, with all the appendices.
Nice.
And Officer O'Mara hasn't read it yet.
He hasn't read it. I'm sure there are plenty of officers and police chiefs that haven't read the document.
Who would want to?
I mean, signing off and moving right along. But we kind of really wanted to know what we were signing off on.
Yes.
And the impact that it
As the wife of an attorney, I would say that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
You should know what you're signing.
So the idea is, when we got back together in July, we focused on compiling a list of, I don't know if concerns is the right word, I think we did settle on that term, but concerns or points of clarification that we feel we wanted to attach to the MOA, because the MOA does have to be signed as is. You can't do any edits to it. We have to accept the document as is. However, our plan is to go in and say, okay, we do have a couple of items that we feel like we just want some more clarification on, or we want to state our kind of position on and add that as an attachment. And that would be done internally first. We will settle on that list, then meet with the chief and come to some sort of agreement, at least discuss our addendum, sign off on it, and then it has to go to attorney. It doesn't have to, but it will go to our attorney review, right? Is that what we talked about, the next thing in the timeline? And then finally, it would have to be submitted and approved by the county prosecutor. And apparently, there is a deadline, but it's quite flexible.
Right.
So
I mean, the document itself is it's a statewide document. It's not one that is differentiated from one town or school community to the next. So that's the document. Right. They want you to sign off on it. They expect that nobody's going to change it, and so that's why we wanted to discuss it in great detail and make comments, and those are the comments that we're going to attach.
And it is, as you said, it's like a catch-all, because it really goes over these broad, from vaping to, I don't know, sexting. I mean, just every sort of kind of teen behavior you could expect to possibly anticipate, but in varying ways or in levels, depending on what district you're in. So a couple of the points that we talked about, or the items that we reviewed, one of them had to do with reporting of HIB by schools to law enforcement. I'm not going to read the line in the MOA, but it basically just requires that victims of HIB should be informed that they may report an alleged offense to a law enforcement agency. So, we were just discussing whether that meshed with our current practice. And so we would want to include a statement that we should allow, our superintendents should have some ability to kind of filter out HIP cases that really should warrant or shouldn't warrant law enforcement reporting.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to put in there as a statement, and we'll see where that goes and if we can keep it there as an attachment. We also talked about, there's a item in the MOA that covers undercover school operations. Sounds really intense here.
What is it? Jump Street, 21 Jump Street, is that what it was?
Really intense.
Man, that was
So,
a show.
The idea, yeah, but the idea is the police department wants their school districts to really cooperate with them if there is a matter that the police department is investigating related to a student and it could potentially impact the school community. We decided that maybe we want to insert a comment that says that, yes, we obviously want to cooperate when it comes to keeping the community safe. To the greatest extent possible, we will do that, but we should have the right to make the final decision as to implementation of any sort of undercover operation on our school grounds. So, I mean, I think that's a pretty baseline.
We were very concerned about wanting to limit, wherever possible, their access, but
without
jeopardizing the safety of our.
I don't want controlled
of our
buys happening
community.
like on the,
In and out
at open lunch.
So anyway.
Yeah, no, that's it. Let's just see if there's anything else about that. I'm not going to read the paragraph. Okay, so the next item that we talked about, video surveillance equipment. So one of the items in the agreement allows for the police department to have remote access to live surveillance equipment in a school district, which we actually will have that capacity to do starting in this coming school year, correct, Scott? Well, we will. Is it coming up for? Okay. So just to be clear, that we will have the capacity to have our live video wirelessly or remotely accessed, but our intention is not to have it be available at any point, any given time by the police department, correct?
For emergencies only, right? A crisis
Exactly,
situation.
yeah. But
right.
not just they could turn it on and see what's going on in the schools at any time. I mean, literally, like.
No, right. Exactly.
I did describe the situation I had in my last school district in which the police actually had a 24-hour live stream in their dispatch area of schools. It's fairly common. It's just a different way of looking at security.
I don't think they have enough officers to maintain surveillance on a live stream continuously
So
throughout the day.
And of course Scott's question was too invasive, maybe. So just, we
They
want to
probably don't wanna
cooperate
do that.
when there is a need, but we
Of
just
course.
don't want to give that kind
Fairly
of.
common doesn't make me feel better.
So.
Well, it'd be good to have in the case of a crisis situation, for
Absolutely, in
sure.
an
For sure.
emergency situation.
Exactly. So we talked about, and we just need some clarity on this whole requirement, because it did indicate that we would need a separate memorandum of understanding, not a memorandum of agreement pertaining to this particular area or issue. So we just need more clarification on this. And we do want to make it clear that, yes, we will certainly cooperate with operations that may impact the safety of our community, but we don't feel that it's necessary to have that kind of free access to our internal video streaming. I think that's it. Oh, and just to say about that video streaming, that Scott, you did confirm that this internal streaming will be for authorized staff only, clearly, which will be principals, Elizabeth Asamoah, I believe you stated possibly, or are you determining still who the final?
Right now, just Ms. Asamoah.
Good. I don't want to, good, okay. And I think that's it.
So the next step with that?
Oh, so just to review, the next step is I think we are pretty clear on what our list is. And the next step is for Scott to arrange a time to meet with the chief. And I believe Officer O'Mara will be in that meeting, or will it just be the chief? I'm not sure what your thoughts are.
We didn't resolve who should be there, but I thought it might be helpful to have the three of them there.
Right, Officer Cabello.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Cabello, O'Mara, and
then one or two of our committee members,
Abrams.
the Equity and Excellence Committee members.
And Darcy.
And Darcy, of course, yes.
So I have a note to arrange that.
Okay. And then after that meeting, then we would presumably have our addendum, take it to our council, right? to have them.
Correct.
just take
I'll
a
bring it to the
look.
county department of education, and then they give it to the prosecutor's office. It probably won't get signed until the next year it's due,
Right.
when all's said and done. Not till probably October, November.
Yeah, and this is a new thing for us and possibly them. So we don't really know what the response is going to be. How are they going to handle getting an addendum to the MOA? You know, so really what happens after that, who knows? Maybe they'll come back to us and say, well, no, we can't sign off on this because of this addendum, or this particular item in your addendum needs to be discussed or struck, whatever the case may be. But at least we have to, and I think this is a part of our discussion, we feel strongly enough about these points that we needed to in some way articulate that before we just signed off on the document as is. So I think that's important for us in terms of our integrity and our commitment here in the district, and even our strategic goals and plans. So just making it in line with that.
We definitely felt comfortable with those comments, and probably others, but we restricted to those. At the same time, wanting to be respectful of the police department and the job that they need to do, and our team, hopefully good team approach between the two groups. So,
Yep. And that's it.
It's good to hear that Officer O'Mara is committed to some of the same principles that Officer Corbello, Captain Corbello was. That's good to hear.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Great. Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions, discussion? All right. It's time for public comment before we vote. The Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation and has reserved this time for your comments. Board policies 164 and 167 establish and regulate the right of the public to participate in public meetings. So we welcome your comments. Anyone? Okay. No last minute takers? All right. Let's move on to voting on our action items. Is that correct, Linda?
Yes.
Am I getting lost? Okay. Is curriculum first? Who's first? Michelle, would you like to move the curriculum item?
Yes, I would like to move item number 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Could we have a roll call, please, Linda?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden Nicola?
Yes.
Mr. Roslevich?
Yes.
All right. Mark, would you like to move the finance items?
Yes, I would, thanks.
Thank you.
Got my voice back.
Excellent.
So I'd like to move items 1 through 21 in the finance and facilities section.
Is there a second?
Second.
May we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Byer?
Yes to everything except for 14 and 15?
And what is your vote on 14 and 15?
No.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden Nicola?
Yes.
Mr. Roslevich?
No on 14, 15, and 16. Yes on the remainder.
Okay. I would like to move the personnel items with the correction previously discussed about the EPIC coordinator's stipend. Do I have a second? Is there a second? May we have a roll call, please, Linda?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden Nicola?
Yes.
Mr. Roslevich?
Abstain on 18, no on 21, and yes on the remainder.
All right. Policies. Mark, would you like to move the policy and regulation items, please?
Yeah, I'd like to move items 1 and 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
May we have a roll call?
Ms. Byer?
Yes.
Ms. Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Gowan?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Magaziner?
Yes.
Ms. McFadden Nicola?
Yes.
Mr. Roslevich?
Yes.
All right. And there are no equity and excellence items to move. I don't think I've forgotten anything else, so let's move on to our board liaison reports. All right. Municipal Drug and Alcohol Alliance. Scott.
Nothing.
Borough of
They
Public...
haven't met, nor had the library met. Well, if they have met, they have not invited me yet.
You're going to invite yourself to the library at some point to discuss the issue with our middle school students. Is that?
I will,
Yeah, sometime
but
soon.
I've been advised to wait until some of the concerns they've had to address outside of their
Oh.
purview of education are resolved, if you
okay.
catch my drift.
I would just jump right in there in the middle of all the other stuff. Great. Okay. Borough of Public Information, Mr. Krieger.
Yeah, so I have nothing on B, C, or M.
Oh, you're doing a lot. Okay. D, HPEF, Mr. Magaziner.
Okay, so there was a meeting on June the 18th. It was mostly internal housekeeping for the group. They reorganized, filled open positions. They reviewed their treasurer's report from the gala the previous month, and discussed the need for more board members, and also future fundraising.
Thank you. Commission for Universal Access, that's actually going to move over to Chris Woodward. At this point, the meetings are still conflicting with school board meetings, although I hope that that will change in the future. But I know Tara is going to be getting agendas and minutes to Chris in the future. Public Library, no. Shared Services, Darcy's not here. Special Education Parent Advisory Committee, no. Human Relations, the commission did meet. I was not able to attend, but I do have the minutes from June 26th. Particularly relevant to the school district was a discussion of anti-Semitism in the community and in our schools, with reference being made specifically to the website incident here in the middle school. There was a feeling expressed by at least one commissioner that some more specific response from the school district should be forthcoming, and I raised that with Scott this afternoon, actually, and you told me about a program with the Anti-Defamation League that you were working on. You could update us?
I used to be on the board of an organization which at the time was called the Center for Holocaust Studies at Brookdale Community College. Never broke my ties with them, so we did reconnect, and partly because we recognize that we are seeing a rise in incidences regarding hate and bias, particularly in the area of anti-Semitism. Since my time on the board, which was back in the 90s, by the way, it was very interesting because I was a kid, I was like in my 20s, and all the other board members were survivors, for the most part. So I would go to these board meetings and it would be like 20 survivors. I got very close with them, and it was a very rich and meaningful relationship. They sent me to Israel for a couple of months one summer to study at Yad Vashem. Now they've expanded, it's called the Center for Holocaust, Human Rights, and Genocide Education, Change with 2 H's, at Brookdale Community College. They had partnered with one school district, Rumson, and are looking to partner with us to bring a program they developed, which we believe is grant funded, called Building Bridges. I have a whole sample agenda that would have them starting with our middle school students, coming to our middle school in September and spending 2 times a month pushing in to our program all the way through June. And if and when we formalize this partnership, I'm having a meeting with Ms. Osemier and Ms. Fittipaldi in a couple of weeks. I will then come to the board with a more comprehensive presentation, but I can share with you just a sampling of some of the things that they would do. They would begin by providing all of our students who are participating with journals and ask that students start to journal through the year. They would spend a whole period of time orienting them to what they refer to as adolescent diaries. Then they would come in the following month and talk about Holocaust survivor histories. Later in the year, meanwhile everything's happening, things are happening a little bit each step of the way. There would be an invite for several hundred of our students to go to Brookdale for the annual Art Educators Workshop that involves students and art educators. And it goes on and on and on. It would culminate in a student performance based on the information that they took away and the things that they learned. So, so we would likely be grant funded. Don't know if it would be fully grant funded, but we just started putting this in motion. The ADL has been helpful, but we have found that I'm finding at least, it's it seems more effective to work with local organization than a big national organization.
I'm sorry, I misspoke when I said it was the ADL.
Yeah,
this
no,
sounds
this
fantastic.
case, no, you actually didn't, because we've been dabbling
I know
with the
you talked with them,
ADL
yeah.
and, groups like Gender Spectrum out in San Francisco. Yeah, it's looking like this is starting to gain traction.
That's wonderful. I can't wait to hear more. And next time I'm able to attend a meeting at the Human Relations Commission, I'll be sure to let them know. Although I see we have a commissioner here in the audience, so perhaps he will also share that information. I did have one question. Oh, I know what it was. Perhaps you could reach out to Ashton, Scott. Let me see if I can recover my agenda. They did talk about trying to have a, sorry, I just lost my place. They did talk about trying to have an event of some sort focusing on hate and ignorance in general, perhaps in September, when students return to school. So perhaps you would want to touch base with
Yeah, well, so our central leadership team, that's the group that you're part of, and Mr. Krieger has been part of off and on, Darcy obviously, and Susan Doozy, and other members of HPEA, has talked about meeting at the beginning of fall to organize a forum for the entire community that would focus on that hate buzz.
That's great. So Ashton could be brought into that discussion, hopefully,
I'm
so there
sure,
wouldn't be like a
because we're gonna
duplicative.
Yeah, we're going to engage the borough, and the
wonderful.
borough's cultural commission is on the forefront of that stuff.
That's fantastic. Great. Thank you. Okay. Hold on. Board of Health, Michelle, any recent meetings?
No recent meetings. They're off for the summer.
Okay. Green Team, Rob Ruslevich.
I do not have an update tonight. I'll try to have something for everyone in the next meeting.
Okay. And Mark, you said no on M. Delegate to New Jersey School Boards, we'll await Darcy's return. And Rob, Delegate to Middlesex County School Boards.
There's no upcoming meetings at this time that I've seen, so
Okay.
quiet there.
I do not have an acting president's report. I can barely make it to the agenda.
You missed parents of students of color, but I don't have anything to report, but just to put it on the record.
I apologize. No, it is on here. I just missed it. I'm sorry. This is.
It is on there, right?
Yes, it's on there.
Okay.
Yes, no, this is just one of many.
It's okay. I just wanted to make sure that
Hiccups.
we don't leave them out, although they
Yes.
did not meet over the summer, and I'm assuming we'll pick back up in September.
It is letter I, right after CPAC. I just skipped over it. Did I skip anybody else? No? Looking good to move forward? Okay. No president's report. Old business. Does anybody have old business that they would like to raise? You sure? It's only 9:20, guys. No? It's fine. All right, nothing? New business. Surely someone has new business. Yes.
I want to commend Mr. Lassiter. One of the things that happened when Genesis rolled out for the summer was trying to access summer assignments. It was kind of, there was a link somewhere in like the final report card message, but I was just like, I sent something to him and I was like, hey, where is this stuff? And he had it up there today. Right on the front page, so the students were able to find it. But I did not reach out to Mrs. Assemble because I no longer have a middle school student, so I'm not sure what kind of middle school summer assignments there are,
Well, I'll follow up about that. Thank you, Rob.
That'd be great. Thank you, Scott. Thank you. That's good for me to know personally and as a board member. So we appreciate that, Mr. Lassiter. And yeah, it'd be good. Maybe it already is up on the middle school Genesis portal, but if it's not, that'd be fantastic. Any other new business? All right. It's time for our second public comment session. The Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation and has reserved this time for your comments. Board Policies 164 and 167, once again, establish and regulate the right of the public to participate in public meetings. Someone please. Nobody's coming to the podium. All right. If I have not forgotten anything else, I would like to move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Good night, everybody. Thank you.